star play. Guess who? Body up the middle, making another move to the outside. 15, 10, end zone again.
Keeps it. Nice move by Brown. He's got space. He's got 6. 35-yard touchdown for Byron Brown. A record-setting night for the South Florida quarterback.
Down so far, a little bit of a high snap. Genty right up the middle. Genty has room. Ashton Genty, give him 6.
Second and long. Lagar tries to pin it in a row. It does. Runnels stays up. The Suns offense 4-3 wheels. Incredible effort for Runnels.
The G5 Hive. All G5, all the time.
Welcome to the G5 Hive Live, and we are excited to bring you another G5 college football coverage that you love each and every week. I am Luke, and I'm joined by my co-host, Justice. Another week of college football down. We're climbing to that halfway point, and guess what? We got an ODU win for our boy Justice. It's away, so you didn't get to maybe celebrate the way you might like at home, but
well, I went to a watch party, so I got to celebrate with other Old Dominion fans. So that was cool. Yeah, there's a local brewery here, Afterglow Brewing, that they are partnered with the NIL collective for Old Dominion, the Pride of ODU. They also recently released a beer where money gets donated to the NIL. And so they've been doing events for athletics, I don't know, since the summer. And they have really great beer too. So just a cool place. Got to enjoy it with other Old Dominion fans. So that was cool. Finally get the W. Harold Fannin Jr., man, dude, oh man, he's a beast. He's a beast. He was their offense. And I was just screaming, just triple cover the guy, put everybody on him or something, man. Because he was just torching Old Dominion, he did it to Penn State, he did it to Texas A&M. He's torched every team he's played this season, and Old Dominion was no different. Lucky to walk out of there with a win.
I did not get to watch as much college football as I would like this weekend. I got to celebrate. I had a college teammate, played college baseball, college shortstop. Brad Bloom made it into the Hall of Fame for our school, so I went back to celebrate with him and some teammates, and it was a blast. Tried to do things like we were young again. Don't recover quite as quickly as I used to, but we went to the bar scene. We rode. We have a drunk bus on campus that will take you to the bars and then back to campus. So we did a tour of that. We were fully immersed in the college experience. It was a fun weekend. It was about a 4.5 hour drive. So that drive back Sunday was a little bit rough. But went to our football game. Our football game did not go too well. I think it was 56-0. It was 10-0 at halftime. 10-0 at halftime and lose. I think it was 56-0, 63. It was not good. So, but hey, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on X, please give us a follow, a like, a retweet. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please give us a rate and review.
Now we're going to move into our waiver wire players for week 5. And Luke's going to kick us off with the quarterbacks.
All right. So quarterbacks, I'm looking, what do we have here on the waivers that are 30% owned or less? That means they're available in 70% or more of your leagues. And I'm looking, again, I'm looking at pass attempts, pass completions, and yardage. So it's if you're throwing a lot but you're not completing, do you want to have these guys on your team? But these are the guys that I have identified. Ben Woldridge, Louisiana, my player of the week, 8% owned. They had Tulane, he scored 39.6 points. Wake Forest, 40.25 points. He has added 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks on the ground. He will get you about 2 to 3 points per game just from rushing. He's not like super mobile, but he'll get you some. He's only taken 3 sacks all year, which, from college, the sack yardage go towards your rushing. Those 3 sacks have accrued for 22 yards. So he's not taking a lot of sacks. So you're not going to lose those 2 to 3 points a lot that you're going to be getting. I feel like you can feel safe getting if you need 23, 26 points per game, I feel like that's his floor. Christian Veer, Georgia State, 4% owned, 26.9 points per game is what he's averaging. They've got a bye this week. Then they've got ODU, Marshall, App State. Go ahead, Justice, tell me when you get scared about something. UConn, JMU, Arkansas State, Texas State, Coastal, Georgia State, they're going to be down. They're going to be throwing the ball. I really like what's going on here. Christian Veer, a 2020 guy I talked about earlier, 4% owned, potential there. 2 other guys here that were on the 2020, so I'm not going to talk about him too much. Jake Garcia, East Carolina. Yeah, he's, puts the ball in danger, but he's 8% owned, averaging 24.8 points per game. Connor Bazelak, Bowling Green, 2% owned, averaging 21.1 points per game. There's a lot of bye weeks this week, so if you need somebody, look at some of those guys. Tyler Huff, Jacksonville State, 10% owned. He's had his last 3 games, 25 points, 28 points, 24 points. He's coming off of a bye. He's a dual threat guy. They've got Kennesaw State, Thursday night, New Mexico State, a bye, and then Middle Tennessee after that. So I like Tyler Huff going forward. Next, we've got Bryson Daly, Army, 18% owned, averaging 31.8 points per game. He's had 49.85 and 35.9 in his last 2. In those 2 games, he had 23 and 24 rushing attempts, respectively. Had over 100 yards rushing in his last 3 contests, with 6 rushing touchdowns in his last 2. They've got Tulsa, UAB, ECU, and then a bye. ECU's defense pretty good, but nothing, just going up against this Army defense, tough to scheme against. So I like Bryson Daly going forward. Then Justice's Offensive Player of the Week, Hajj-Malik Williams, UNLV, 7% owned. He just put up 45 points against Fresno State. He went 13 of 16 for 182 yards. Saluka never threw for that many yards in his starts. 161 against Dixon was the most that he had thrown. He's had 3 touchdowns and ran it 12 times for 119 yards and a touchdown. Is Hajj-Malik Williams. Brennan Lewis, mentioned Nevada, likes to throw the ball. He's a 22% owned dual threat guy, has a good floor. We've got conference play coming up. They've got San Jose State, Oregon State, Fresno State, and Hawaii. J.C. French and Mikey Keene, both on the 2020 list, so I'm not going to talk too much about them. J.C. French, Georgia Southern, Mikey Keene, Fresno State, 26 and 25% owned, respectively. J.C. French averaging 22.5 points per game, while Mikey Keene 20.5 points per game. Justice, what do you got there for running backs?
All right. Actually, this unlike weeks past where we've kind of struggled, I feel like, I don't know, I didn't struggle too much to kind of find 10 guys to kind of recommend here. Number 1, we've been talking about him, I think, since week 1. He's still only 13% owned. And he's a bit of a cheat code. He's listed as a minor back on the official roster in Fantrax. He has running back and wide receiver eligibility. That's Cam Thomas from UTEP. And he does all his work in the passing game. So really, this is a play for leagues that are PPR leagues, and it's really a floor play, right? He doesn't have a super high ceiling, but he's going to get you, 13 to 15 points each and every single week. He's getting 5 to 8 receptions a game and 50 to 90 yards. He was on a bye week last week, and he's averaging 15 points per game in PPR. Next up, guy that was made the 2020 list, Razul Faison, Utah State, only 11% owned, 18 touches per game, 101 yards. Again, on a bye week last week. So I think, maybe folks didn't pick him up last week because he was on a bye. So maybe he won't make this list again next week. But he looks to be the lead dog in 2 back-to-back 100-yard games, like Luke said earlier. Running back Rajai Harris, East Carolina, 16% owned, 12.5 points per game, averaging 19 touches per game. Someone new this week, AJ Turner at Marshall. He's only 4% owned. He's getting limited touches. I would guess he's averaging like 9 touches, maybe 10 touches a game. But he has 3 100-yard games. He clearly looks like the best running back there at Marshall. Hopefully he can get more run moving forward. But again, he's super productive on limited touches. Next,
Justice, the number there is he's got 8 touches per game is what he's averaging. 8.25 technically.
What's his yards per game?
102. And
he's averaging 100 yards on 8 touches.
Yeah, and
that's impressive.
He's getting 7 of those 8 touches are rushes, 1 reception per game for 8 yards, on only 1 touchdown. But yeah,
super impressive there for AJ Turner. Hopefully we'll see his volume increase because he, like I said, he definitely looks like the best running back there for the Thundering Herd. Next up, our freshman offensive player of the week, Ahmad Hardy, UL Monroe, only 5% owned. As we mentioned earlier, he has 2 100-yard games on the season. He looks to be the focal point of that Warhawk offense. All right, next up, running back Seth McGowan, New Mexico State, 19% owned. He's getting anywhere between 11 to 15 carries a week, 50 to 90 yards. He definitely looks like the most productive running back for New Mexico State, but they do spread the ball around. They do kind of take a committee approach there. He is averaging 13.7 points per game. Next, and I think this is the first time we've mentioned him, is running back Jaden Nixon from Western Michigan. Only 5% owned. We have been asking our contacts, what is going on with Jalen Buckley? Nobody knows. If they do know, they're not speaking. And so all we can tell you is Jaden Nixon, the last 2 games, he's had 189 yards and 146 yards. I think if he's available, you got to go get him. And then just kind of pay attention to see if Buckley's going to be back. The MAC does provide availability reports, so you can kind of use that. It's not the end-all, be-all, but it's better than nothing. But, man, it's clear that until Buckley returns, Jaden Nixon is going to be the man for Western Michigan. And for all we know, Jalen Buckley might not return. We just don't know. If we find anything out, we will definitely share that information.
I got a question. Do they start MAC play this week?
Yes, I believe so.
I've just got this gut feeling Buckley's coming back this week, and they've been holding him out because they want him for the MAC. So that's I don't know. I'm, I guess, more cautious than you are, Justice. I get it. With the information we have, that he should be owned, but I feel like he's, with how Fantrax has the substitution, the Jalen Buckley owner needs to make sure to have him and just have him as a swap, pretty much, because it doesn't matter who you get. But I have a sneaking suspicion that Buckley is going to be back.
I don't know. See, I feel the opposite. I have this sneaking suspicion that he's out for the year. They haven't told anybody. But yeah, I don't know. The way Nixon's producing, if he's available, you got to go get him. If you're hurting for running backs, because if there's a chance he carries a load the rest of the year, man, he could be an every week starter for you. All right, next up, running back Floyd Chalk, San Jose State, 23% owned, 12 touches, 64 yards per game. He's getting the scoring opportunities, the goal line carries there for the Spartans. They are a high-flying offense, so lots of scoring opportunities for Floyd Chalk. He was also on a bye last week. And then C.J. Campbell, first time I think we're talking about him. Florida Atlantic, 5% owned. Florida Atlantic is a committee approach, but it appears Campbell is getting the goal line work. He's only 5% owned. He has 20-plus points in each of the last 3 weeks. And even though they're sharing the load with him and Zoo Mobley, he's still getting around 15 touches a week. And rounding out the running backs, Jay Ducker, Sam Houston, only 5% owned. He's taken over as the lead back for Sam Houston. He has hit 20-plus points in 2 of the last 3 weeks. Again, if you're looking for running back, Jay Ducker looks to be the man moving forward there for the Sam Houston Bearcats. Now we're going to go back to Luke and the wide receivers.
All right, wide receivers. Let's stick with Western Michigan. Kenneth Womack makes his appearance. Had a cast on his hand for most of the beginning of the year. 10.3 points per game. That was his first game back. He had 6 receptions on 9 targets for 43 yards, and he led the team in receptions on his first game back. I think Western Michigan wants to continue to keep him a part of their offense, but he might be, available. I don't have the percentage on this one. I must have forgot, but a guy that maybe people dropped after that first game, figuring he had a cast on his hand. Go see if Kenneth Womack is available. Cade McDonald, Miami. He's a 30% owned, so he's right at the threshold. I don't imagine that we'll be talking about him next week. He is a 2020 guy, averaging 15.7 points per game. If you want to hear more about him,
They say
they talked about him.
0% for Womack.
0%. All right. Let me write that down so I got it. Junior Vanderos Toledo, 15% owned, averaging 16.2 points per game. He's a good floor guy. They've got a bye in week 5 this last week. Then they've got Miami this week, Buffalo, NIU, Bowling Green. So not like a great matchup, but I think definitely usable. And like I said, there's a lot of people on bye this week. So if you have to use Junior Vanderos, he's going to be a part of that offensive game plan. Elijah Metcalf, Marshall, 17% owned, 14 points per game. A rough game a little bit last week, but 6 targets a game for 48 yards is what he's averaging, and I feel like it's kind of been more like up and down. Like you get a big game or a little game. That's why that 48 yards is a little bit. What do I want to say?
Misleading.
Help me out with my words. Misleading. There we go. Ted Hurst, Georgia State, 22% owned, 19.5 points per game, 2020 guy. They're on a bye then. I talked about there earlier. We got ODU, Marshall, App State, UConn, JMU, Arkansas State, Texas State, Coastal Carolina. I like just Georgia State players going forward. Then we've got Coleman Owen, Ohio. Parker Navarro came back this last week, which definitely found his man Owen there, averaging 17.9 points per game, averaging 7 targets, 6 receptions, 93 yards per game. Bye week this week in week 6. Then you got Central Michigan, Miami, Buffalo, bye, Kent State, Eastern Michigan, Toledo, Ball State. I mean, you don't love Toledo. You don't love Miami, but that's a good enough stretch that he's probably in your lineup the rest of the week, other than the bye week this week, and then after Buffalo. Raylan Sharp, Fresno State, 1% owned. His last 3 weeks, his targets are 9, 7, 16. Fantasy points 18.2, 18.2, 21.6. What's there not to like? Only 1% owned. Mountain West play is here, and Sharp is here to stay. We got Oren Singleton, Eastern Michigan, 6% owned. He's had targets his last 3 weeks of 10, 11, 12. So you like that he's getting those targets. He's had fantasy points of 16.9, 15.6, 18.6 respectively, averaging 62 yards and 6 receptions per game, getting you some touchdowns. Dean Patterson, FIU, 3%. He was heating up those last 2 weeks with 25 and 16 points, only 12.4 points this last week. However, he had 7 targets, 5 receptions for 74 yards. So still, put up a solid day for you. Dean Patterson, a name to know. And then Adrian Norton, Akron, 6% owned. His last 4 games of targets are 5, 11, 9, and 9. Fantasy points of 14.5, 23.5, 15.6, and 10.9. And a touchdown in 3 of his last 4 games. So if you're just counting on, hey, who's going to luck into a touchdown, Norton might be a guy. Something that's kind of interesting about Akron, though, they're really passing the ball around there. So he might not be the guy. I mean, he's the one that's getting the touchdowns right now. It might not always be that case, but Akron's tossing the ball around a little bit more.
All right, rounding out the with the tight ends here. I'll mention Dorian Fleming. He's not pictured. He's a 2020 guy. We talked about him in that segment. He's 14% owned, averaging 12 points per game. John Michael Gillenborg, Wyoming. He's missed the first few games of the year. He's been back, and he's been back strong the last 2 weeks. 10 plus points in those 2 weeks he's been back. He's only 20% owned. I think people were high on him to begin the year, and then you find out he's out. Folks dropped him, and they may have forgotten about him. So if you're in a league where John Michael Gillenborg is available, I'd definitely go look and snatch him up. He is roommates with Evan Svoboda. We learned that when we did our Worker Bee series there with Wyoming. Colin Weber, Charlotte, 3%. He's backup QB, but still had 9 targets in week 5, each averaging 5.6 targets, 3 receptions, 30 yards per game. Eli Wilson, App State, kind of old reliable there, 16% owned, getting 4 targets and 30 yards per game. He's just kind of steady and reliable. They did not play last week as the game got canceled. Anthony Torres, Toledo, 9% owned. They were on a bye last week, but he scored a touchdown in 3 of 4 weeks, and he leads the G5 tight ends in touchdowns with 4. And then Jacob Newell. Jake Newell, we talked about him in the 2020 guy for the first time tonight, but we have talked about him in the waiver wires, I think, for the last 3 weeks now. He is only 2% owned. He got 11 targets in week 5. And so he we talked about Adrian Norton. Jake Newell is also getting targeted in that Akron offense.
I think Newell is actually leading the room in
targets,
receptions.
Yeah, he is coming on strong for Akron. Like I said, averaging 6 targets a game, 34 yards per game, 2020 guy. We are now in MAC play, and if Jake Newell is available in your leagues and you're hurting for tight ends, he might be my number 1 ad, even over Gillenborg. It'd be close between the 2 of them, but those would be the top 2 of these 5 for me, especially getting into conference play there for Newell.
All right, that is going to do it for our waiver wire segment. Come back and join us next week as we discuss what happened in week 6, as well as look forward to week 7 of the 2024 season, as well as bring you all up to date on the latest news and happenings in the world of G5 college football. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on X, please give us a retweet, a like, and a follow. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe and leave those 5-star ratings and review. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.